about 6 hours to go through just photos with my family. And I didn't even get to really tell them much about the trip. So I've been given 25 minutes, so I'm going to really try to stick to that here. But hopefully it'll just whet your appetite, and my goal is to share with you what I learned in Israel, and also hopefully whet your appetite for desire to go yourself to the Holy Land. So how did I hear about going to Israel? We have friends of ours who, he's a pastor out in California. He has many children, and he takes a trip to Israel about every 2 years. This was actually his 16th trip to Israel. His name is Pastor Lance Sparks, and I went with a group of about 32 people. They were mostly from his church, but 2 of us were from the East Coast. Myself and then my friend Sarah, who's from nursing school, she went with me as well. And one of the things I think before I show you the slideshow, I want to kind of give you an overview. When you go to Israel, you learn very, very quickly that the culture there is completely different from here in America. And whether you're going to Guatemala or any other country, the culture is completely different. But what I think one of the things that I realized was we don't really understand how much our culture here in America and our understanding of things here in America influences the way that we read the scriptures. And so a few things that were kind of interesting, for instance, when we're talking about the birth of Christ and you're reading about a stable, we think about a wooden stall, and we've all got the little wooden manger scenes. But it most likely wasn't a wooden stable, it was most likely a cave. And you'll see that on the pictures, and I'll be able to explain why. So a stable wasn't really a wooden stable. An inn, that's the way that the word has been translated into our Bible, that there was no room in an inn. But the inn wasn't really a motel, a common motel as we always think of it as. People weren't knocking on doors trying to, get into the, one last room in the hotel. It was most likely just that family gathering place, that one room, that one home. So an inn isn't really an inn in the way that we think of it. And then thirdly, if you think about, when they talk about Jesus being a carpenter, most likely that was stonemasonry and not actually wood that he was working with. So those are a few different things that I learned that were a little bit different from what we see, but the point being not that the translation is wrong, it's just that our understanding, because of the way that the word was translated, our understanding is completely different. And unless you go to Israel and hear from the translators there and learn about the culture and see what's going on, you don't really realize that. So without further ado, I want to start off with a slideshow. There are a lot of slides. It's going to be very quick. It's a brief overview of the many, many, many places we went. But after you see the slideshow, then I'll be able to share with you about a few of the places specifically. Shalom Alechem, and that means we bring you peace. And so those are the two phrases that you were hearing in that song, and then of course the part that actually came out in translation for you, which was pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So it was a very rigorous trip. We would start our mornings, well, let me talk first about a little bit about preparation. I heard about the trip in 2010. I talked with somebody who had just gone, and they said, Annalise, you really need to pray about going to Israel. And I did, kind of infrequently, on and off. And then the more I thought about it and prayed about it, about a year out from the trip, I said, you know what, Mom and Dad, can you start praying about this with me? I'd really like to go to Israel. And so to be a mile marker in my life, I went ahead and decided to go to Israel. And so that was in February of this year. We went for about 2 weeks. And there was a lot of prayer that went into it. Of course, we were praying much beforehand. But I highly recommend, for any of you who decide you would like to go to Israel, Christian Traveler's Guide to the Holy Land. This is a phenomenal book. It has a lot of pictures in it. It talks about the different places. And this book became a very handy guide. Before I went, I was constantly reading about the different places we were going. And then while we were there, I would read the night before and the night after from here. And this was a very big help. So it's my little plug for that book. It'll be out on the table in the back if you want to see it. When we arrived, Pastor Lance gave each of us a journal. It was wonderful to have a journal. Basically what would happen is in each of our days, every place we would go, Pastor Lance would do 20 to 30 minutes of teaching. And this would happen